Hello and welcome to Low Volume, Low Small Form Factor.net's podcast. I can't really talk right now because I'm tired, but my name is Joshua Ramirez, aka Playful Phoenix. And as always, I am joined by my two comrades, my two fighters side by side, the two other J's that make the three J's so great. John, aka Confucius. John, how you doing?
Not bad, not bad. How are you?
I'm really tired and apparently out of my mind. I'm also joined
Awesome.
by James, aka Abophobia. How you doing, James?
Doing good. Almost slept in. It's
I
like,
did sleep in.
yeah, because it's like actually I woke up before my alarm went off, which is unusual because it's like 4 in the
Wow.
morning here. When I wake up for these things, and it's like oh, okay, and then like I check the clock again, and it's like 4:20. It's like oh, oops.
I'm not going to comment
I
on
did
420.
I did the same thing and it was like almost half past, so I can't really get mad at you because I did literally the exact same thing. So it's all right. It's all right. We
Yeah,
pull through together, guys.
that's okay. I woke up like, what, 14, 16 hours ago? 17 hours ago?
Hashtag humble brag. All right. Well, look, we got plenty to talk about, so I'm just gonna go ahead and jump straight into the news. To start, I see a note on my paper here for information on Instagram and social media. So since I don't quite know what we're talking about here, I'm just gonna let John fill us in.
So
I
in the
believe it's we
right.
published an article recently reminding folks of our social media accounts, essentially, right?
Yes, that is correct. So we are active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And recently we basically refreshed the Instagram account so that it was entirely under our control because previously it was being run by a forum member. Unfortunately, it kind of fell to the side and wasn't updated as much as it should have been. So we went ahead and created a new one, and yeah, so it's instagram.com/FFF network. It is linked on our front page and will be linked in the podcast notes. So it'll be basically pictures of the reviews that we're doing, updates on articles, maybe some sneak previews of things. We'll see how things go. So the content that's the content that's going on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram will be different between each network for some things. So follow us all on follow each of them, and you might see some things that might excite you.
Interesting, interesting.
Indeed.
Needless to say, there are certain things coming up in the near that we may participate in that may or may not see lots and lots of content that you would probably be interested in seeing. So we highly encourage anyone and everyone, if you're on social media, we're on all of the platforms.
Except for Google
We do
Plus,
the
because nobody's on Google Plus.
Well, Google employees are on Google Plus, but except for Google Plus, sorry, Google employees, you have to get a Facebook too. You know, we do the Twitters, we do the Instagrams, we do the Facebooks. We don't do the Facebook Lives yet, maybe in the future, but
No.
we encourage you to follow us along through all of the appropriate social vectors. We don't do any illicit or questionable information gathering, only the respective social companies do. Yes, and then in the chat, of course, Tinder. Yes, we're looking to expand to Tinder
I thought you were on.
relatively soon.
I thought you had already set up our Grinder account.
Yeah, Grindr. We don't talk about these things. Anyway, on to the news. We're gonna start with something that is a little boring, a little rudimentary, but at the same time interesting. Certainly for the folks that actually own some of these coolers. This is a story you wrote, John, towards the beginning of the month, and it actually has to do with Noctua, which is a company we haven't talked for in a while. And what they've done is they've introduced 3 new coolers for AM4, which of course is the socket for the upcoming Ryzen series of processors from AMD. So I was wondering if you could talk a little more about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've released a AM4 version of the L9X65, the U12S, and the D15. So you've got a broad spectrum of sizes. Conveniently, there's a small one out of 3. Not bad, I suppose. But the interesting thing that I take out of this is that Noctua has enough faith in this new platform to put out 3 special edition products for this. So it's not just a case of just changing the mounts and sending it out with us. They've actually changed the packaging and made some other tweaks, if I remember rightly, to these products. And that's a lot of, like, what's the word for it? It's a significant chunk of money just to get this stuff out the door with new packaging. So I wonder if Noctua knows something.
I mean, it could. Or go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's the opposite. I think they're taking a very conservative approach and only doing 3 instead of the whole line.
Well, they're offering free mounting kits for the rest of the product lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm thinking they're hedging their bets, because if Ryzen isn't popular, then there's not going to be many people taking advantage of that offer, and then they only have these three coolers. And I think somebody mentioned somewhere that they do not come with the Intel brackets, like these AM4 ones. So like they saved the money by not including all the other hardware to have the AM4 hardware.
Interesting.
So I think I'll have to double check it, but
looking at the packaging, it looks like it's missing it.
Yeah, so I think this is really more hedging their bet, because I think if they were all in on Ryzen, like they would just refresh the whole line.
Yeah, but I don't remember the last time they did a specific, apart from the server stuff, a specific one for, say, 2011 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, so that's why I'm thinking it's actually more cautious than anything. Because like previously, they just would have refreshed the whole line.
I mean, is there anything stopping them from just creating a bracket or brackets for all of the remainder of their lineup? I mean, they don't have to. Oh, is that what they've done?
Yeah. Oh, well, this one, the packaging is specifically aimed for. It comes with a new mounting bracket, but James is saying not the Intel stuff. But if you already own a Noctua cooler, you can get the mounting brackets free from Noctua for your existing Noctua cooler.
Oh, well then, yeah. I mean, you know, great. You know, for most, I think there are gonna be more people that have coolers that would want to be compatible than not. So then, you know, folks that would be looking to buy a whole new one once this came out. So it's been a long-standing policy / tradition for them to do this, right? To basically, if you own a cooler and you get new hardware and it's incompatible and you need that bracket, that you just let them know and they'll send it to you for free. It's kind of one of the things you pay for when you buy one of their coolers.
Indeed.
So that they're extending this to new generation ones is great, albeit somewhat expected.
Yep.
But otherwise, I think James's reasoning makes a lot of sense insofar that it's definitely a heck of a lot less costly for them to, you know, break out some new brackets versus completely reconfigure how cooler works and have to redo the packaging and whatnot. So clearly there's enough. There's enough there where they've decided to do that for some of their coolers.
Yeah, but not the whole lot.
But they may just be waiting for the market to validate that was a good move before they push that across the remainder of their products.
And speaking of free things, Noctua is not the only one offering free mounting brackets. There's also Fantex, Innomax, Be Quiet, Cryorig, Corsair, Deepcool, AlphaCool, Silentium PC, Thermalright, and Coolmaster, all offering free brackets for your AM4. If you own,
are they offering brackets, or are they like offering it for free for the existing customers?
They're offering for free for the existing customers.
Oh wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, everyone's hopped on the bandwagon for it. There's no real ones that I can see.
I wonder if it's like warranties, like they just assume like very few people will actually take advantage of that offer.
That's a token gesture, just to be interesting.
Because like Noctua, I mean, their coolers are not cheap, so I mean I can imagine they have enough margin. But like Cooler Master, I mean, some of the coolers they sell are not very expensive.
They could just charge for the brackets.
Well, they're saying it's for free though, right?
Yeah, if you own an existing product. That is compatible.
And with like Noctua, it's fine because like almost all their coolers use the same mounting, but like most of the other ones, like Cooler Master, like they're not universal at all. So like I don't know how that really works logistically.
There might be just a small list of this will work, this won't. Sucks to be here.
You can get free brackets for this one heatsink we only sold 100 of.
Yeah, sounds about right.
that costs $300.
Yeah. Like, too bad for the rest of you.
Yeah, but we offered this free thing.
That'd be so scummy.
I didn't even know Enermax made heatsinks.
All right. Moving on. The next thing in our lineup is actually something that I personally am very excited about, as I'm sure almost all of us are. This was something that when we first sort of got eyes on it and heard about it, it was sort of a shock to us just because, we've definitely seen a movement in the marketplace towards trying to miniaturize a lot of the graphics cards just to make them more compact so they're compatible with more builds and obviously with smaller builds. But that's usually been limited to ones that are sort of further down the line with respect to, the enthusiast grade, the gamer grade, right? So like, a 1060, oh yeah, sure, there'll be a mini version. 1070, well, yeah, I guess if you're lucky, there might be one manufacturer might make some miniaturized version that would be helpful, and then boom, like you have a solution that's reasonably powerful. But of all companies, Zotac, not that long ago, actually announced that they're going to make a shortened GTX 1080, and boy, it's now in stock. I believe it's listed for something in the vicinity of like 600-ish, or excuse me, $700-ish dollars.
No, it's 600 now. There were some price gougers at like the first day or two, but then
Isn't there always?
like it showed up properly in stock, and now it's 610.
But yeah, so for folks that haven't actually seen it, we encourage you to look at the article on Small Form Factor Network. The PCB size of it itself is pretty close to as small as you can make it. The shroud and heatsink itself, although they match the width roughly of the card, which is just standard PCI width, it does extend past the edge of the PCB probably about, I don't know, an inch and a half or so. But
yeah,
even
it's quite a bit.
Even if you take that into account, I mean, it's certainly much shorter than reference 1080 than any other 1080 card. And you have to bear in mind, this is with the fact that not only did they not downclock it at all, they actually give it a very slight overclock. So you're not seeing any performance degradation, at least on the box, as a consequence of them really sort of prioritizing compactness. So from an engineering perspective, this is actually quite an impressive feat. I'll be interested to see what the consequences of that will be with respect to noise, with respect to, how it's going to handle thermal load, especially after extended periods of use. But the fact that this even exists is sort of a strong endorsement of the idea that there's a desire in the marketplace for really, really powerful hardware, like the literal top of the stack, unless you like burning money, in which case the Titan's for you. And the fact that they're actually going out and making this, and they're finding a way to say, we want to be able to provide that level of compactness and not actually meaningfully compromise performance in any way. So super exciting part. Now it's actually available. Always takes a little while from the time in which they're announced to the time in which you can actually throw your money at them, but there it is, and you can get it on Newegg as well as Amazon if you like overpaying.
Yeah. Yep, it's a cool card, so we'll see. And then, I guess speaking of short cards, there's like really no information about it. But yeah, like some people are mentioning in the chat. So MSI is teasing a short video card of some sort. And we were kind of discussing it before the podcast started, that more than likely it's a 1070. Because I don't believe MSI even did a short 970. So for them to jump all the way to a short 1080 seems like way too much of a stretch. Whereas like short 1070s, we've seen that from several vendors now. So yeah, and then like a short 1060 doesn't really make sense to hype up like this because they already have a couple just kind of like just real basic. It's like their entry level 1060 models with just like real basic coolers. Just like extruded aluminum heatsink type of deals.
A bit of plastic set on the top of it.
Yeah, so I can't imagine that they would hype up a 1060, and then a 1080 seems like too much. So it's almost certainly a 1080, or no,
1070.
sorry, 1070. And then it's too early for Vegas, so I don't. And
could be a Titan XP.
Well, there's only reference of that. So, which is hilarious though, because I think it was April Fool's last year, or year before, or something like that. Like Nvidia posted like a shopped picture of like an ultra short reference Titan or something.
Yeah.
which actually would be amazing if they ever did make something like that. But
I think that was just before the Nano came out.
yeah, and then the Nano's like, haha,
I actually exist.
no, it's not a joke. Yep. So we'll see. I think they're talking next week on the MSI. So hopefully we'll see what it is next week.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next up for the news, we have news for Intel, which is sort of interesting given the timing. I'll just read straight from the article here. In what could be seen as a throw enough stuff at the wall and hope something sticks reaction to AMD's Ryzen. Looks like one of our reporters has a beef.
Nope.
Tech Power Up is reporting that Intel's readying a new line of processors aimed at creative professional workstations. These would be branded Xeon Gold processors, and they'd be based on the Skylake EP architecture. And you know, I mean, if you read the tea leaves here, obviously you'd think that who's the target for this? Well, creative professionals or folks that want like beefy, reliable, probably very highly threaded workstations, workloads in mostly professional settings. I actually find that this is sort of an interesting thing for Intel to be doing, because I definitely can tell. Like, I know that this demand is actually existent. Like, I know that there are lots of folks, raise his hand, that would really like to have the stability, or at least the assumed stability of a Xeon part of an actual like server part in the context of like a workstation, like a desktop workstation that's just meant to like run a desktop operating system and run desktop software. I obviously have concerns that they're gonna price this incredibly highly if they're calling it the Xeon Gold processor line. That doesn't give me much hope that the prices for those are going to be anywhere remotely reasonable. Furthermore, when they tend to target business or enterprise or other contexts, they kind of know that they can get away with charging a lot more because their customers will probably pay it.
Yeah.
So that's probably what they're going to do. It will be interesting to see how these parts compare directly to just straight up Xeon parts, though. And I'm wondering what changes they're going to be making. So Tech Power Up did have some details with respect to granular features for some of these processors. So they said the first one, top of the list, would be the Xeon Gold 6150. This is an 18-core, 36-thread part with a meg of L2 cache per core. So 18 megs of L2 cache.
Which is, it's 4 times the L2 cache than the regular Skylake architecture.
Yeah. And then the L3 cache will still be like almost 25 megs.
Yeah.
And this is with a base clock of 2.7 gigs, which boosts up to 3.7. So you have to bear in mind, with this many cores and threads, the typical trade-off is that, well, for highly threaded workflows or software, you know, you really want that, and it's okay if the clock drops to, you know, like 2.3, 2.4. So the fact that it bottoms out at 2.7 and they're able to boost when you're only using a select number of cores up to 3.7 actually alleviates a lot of those problems. And those are far more prevalent and persistent when you're talking about usage in a desktop context rather than a server context. And it's kind of one of the big sacrifices you'd make if you were using a Xeon part for servers in your desktop build. So at least on paper, at least based on what has been reported and leaked and so on and so forth, Intel has been somewhat thoughtful in terms of what they can do to actually orient this idea and really make sure it's addressing all the right problems and concerns and whatnot. I don't know if any more has sort of been leaked or divulged from this. I think it's certainly interesting, but without any knowledge of a price point or availability or even a lot of just the information that comes part and parcel of the product announcement that we don't know yet, it's sort of hard to make it's hard to sort of say whether or not this is kind of something to actually look forward to or to just roll your eyes once the $4,899 price point with no heatsink included is formally announced.
And the timing to me is interesting because it's the Xeon Gold, you've got the i3K series, you've got a possibly hyper-threaded i5 coming out, you've got clock bumps on both i5s and i7s being announced. It's interesting.
Well, I mean, Skylake E, and then I guess Skylake EP, I mean, those were already kind of expected around Q2, Q3 anyway. So, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting that the leak of the gold is coming out now, but I mean, I don't think it's like they just whipped this up together to compete with Ryzen. I'm sure this was already in the works.
Especially with that core count and that kind of clock speed, that's not something you can just like, oh, we'll just overclock it slightly and release a new SKU.
Yeah, Xeons have lots and lots of work and documentation that goes into them.
So like, the testing that goes into each one, they have to be perfect.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's just the marketing seems odd though, because like gold, like the Xeon Gold, because like the people buying these things don't care about stupid marketing.
They want specs.
all about them spec sheets. So I don't know. It just seems weird.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. Was there a timeline associated with this leak, or?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I'm actually looking at the TPU article right now, and I'm not seeing any indication of it. I don't know if this would be like a Computex thing. It could be sooner. I mean, you know, it's enough information that I trust in. It feels substantial. And it's probably coming soon, but it's also not enough information where I feel like it's imminent. So I'd read this as like a Q2
I'm
or
feeling
somewhere
Q2 on
in
this one.
H1. Yeah. But you know, we'll just wait and see.
Indeed.
It's certainly interesting, but as I said before, I don't think there's quite enough information here for any of us to get particularly excited.
Yeah, I look forward to buying one in about 6 years when it's on the used market and I can actually afford it.
Oh man. All right, so the last item in the news that we have is actually something that I don't know much about, but I think if I just read the headline here, I think a lot of people will understand why we find this to be newsworthy. And that is the Eurocom 780 watt external power supply. Let me repeat that. 780 watt external power supply. So I don't know which of you two is more familiar with this, but please tell me more. I wonder who
I
could
was
possibly know
joking
more
that
about
it's
this.
basically a way, like I'm pretty sure this is aimed at server admins who just find the drone of the server racks comforting, and like when they go on business trips, they just want to take that drone with them. Yeah, because we were doing some on the spot investigative journalism earlier, and I think we've determined that the fans, there's two, not like, it's kind of weird because it looks like a 1U server PSU at first, but the dimensions don't really match up. So it's a little too thin for 40 millimeter fans. So I think we've determined that there's the fans in these things are ProTechnic MGT 3812XB-W28s, which there's two different versions of that fan, but one's 13,000 RPM and the other's 15,000. And there's two of them in this power supply. So yeah, if it comes anywhere close to full load, I imagine the thing will try to like fly off your desk.
I'll probably expose the screw-on power connector.
Is
The
that
tether.
a feature or a bug?
But yeah, basically
Oh, boy.
what this is though, it really is. It looks like the dimensions don't quite match up, but like I said, it's basically a 1U power supply, but it's an external brick. So it goes with like the Eurocom, Sager, Clevo type of like desktop replacement laptops. So like, if for people who aren't familiar with these laptops, like when they call them desktop replacements, they are not joking. These things are huge, they're heavy, but they pack some serious hardware. So they usually have literally desktop processors.
Yeah.
Not the M, not the HQ, not the U, none of that junk. They're actual desktop processors. And it's not like they're doing like a 6400T or something like that. Like they put like X99 chips in these things. So 6 core, 10 core, 12 core, like high-end desktop Intel processors. And then like usually I don't think they've gone quite as extreme as full desktop GPUs, but I mean the the 1000 series or the 1000 series mobile lap cards are basically desktop chips just downclocked. So yeah, you can get these with like the GTX 1080 and MXM format. So, I mean, 780 is still overkill, but like the laptops these things are designed for really do use quite a bit of power.
The batteries
so
and the
it's
token
just-
gestures.
But yeah, we were joking that there's absolutely no mention of noise on the spec sheets for this thing on the marketing. So generally, if they don't want to talk about it, that's not a good sign.
It's like, don't ask, please don't ask.
It's fine. Everything is fine. This is fine. It's totally fine. It's completely fine. Why would you even have to ask? It's
It's not fine. I can hear you testing it from 3 countries over. You just drowned out my 1U server that I got.
Well, hey, look at it this way. If you listen to it very long, you won't have to listen to any other power supply ever again.
You pick up something with like.
Now, is that you won't have to listen to any other parasite again because it will deaf you, or is it because it'll burn your house down and you'll burn down with it and you'll never have to listen to anything again?
I mean, it looks well built, so I don't think it'll burn your house down. But
Oh, that's
you may not be able to hear it again, or anything else.
or anything else.
It'll burn your
Wow,
ear canals
alright.
down.
But I mean, like, what I'm hoping, because like, I'm not sure when the review will go up, but I actually like it's. I don't think Eifrelicht is on the podcast. Well, he's on the chat, or he's online, but I don't think he's listening. But he's been really pushing for Flex ATX for a long time now. So there's like a 500 watt Flex ATX unit from FSP that's platinum rated. So I mean, because like this 780 watt Furicom thing's impressive, but I mean Flex ATX is a lot smaller than even this. So so like 500 watts in Flex ATX is just crazy. So I've been testing it, and at idle it's surprisingly quiet, like astoundingly so. Like if it's idle up to about 100 watt load, it like really it's quieter than the SX 550 I recently reviewed at.
That's
the same
impressive.
loads. Yeah. Which I mean the SX 550 only has an 80 millimeter fan, unfortunately, so that's not really that great. But even the ST30 SFV2 and the ST45 SFV3, this Flex ATX with this little 40 millimeter fan is actually quieter than both of those at idle. But at load,
Nope.
oh man. You get anywhere, I think, above 400 watt load, and it does the full 13,000 RPM, and it is annoying. It is very annoying to listen to. So yeah, and this Eurocom has 2 38 millimeter fans. So, and especially if it's the 15,000 RPM models, it would be just screaming at full load if it comes anywhere near that. But what I'm hoping is that at like idle, I think it will probably be pretty quiet like the Flex ATX. But I guess the question is it still that quiet at the loads these laptops are going to be running at? Because I mean, these laptops can easily do like 250, 300 watts. So I guess the question is going to be, what kind of RPM are you talking at that load level?
And they're only talking about 90% efficiency on the brick as well. So at 780 watts, you're talking about cooling 78 watts.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if you crunch the numbers for the Flex ATX, I mean, it's only like 30, 40 watts. So you would think the fan doesn't need to go 13,000 RPM to dissipate that. But
it's only
I
at
guess-
40.
yeah, I guess because like their server power supplies, they're just conservative on the cooling.
Yes.
So I don't know. We'll see. I guess we'll just have to wait and see until somebody actually like gets their hands on one of these and uses it and reports back on if they go death or not.
And no doubt one of our members of the community will pick one up.
Well, oh yeah, that's
'Cause-
the other thing though, is that this brick is $475.
US.
Yeah. It's it's
50 cents a
I
watt.
mean, it's impressive, but it's like I'm definitely not just buying it just to try it. That's way too rich for me. Because that Flex ATX FSP is like 130. It's oh yeah, the reason I got it is because like for the longest time, like it was kind of like you had to like kind of convince FSP to sell you a sample. But now it's just like straight up on Amazon. You just like straight up order it. But it's 130, so I was like, oh, that's not too bad. But almost $500, and then even then, it's like it's not. I mean, it's a brick, so like it's basically a 1U power supply, but it has a 19-volt 4-pin connector. So, like connecting that to anything like a normal PC will be a bit of a problem. Because I mean, I'm sure with enough adapters, you could hook it up to like an HD Plex or something. But I mean, that only goes up to 300 watts. So like that's
mount the adapters.
yeah. So it's like I don't know why you'd bother. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's cool that it exists, but I don't know really of how much practical use it would be for like us, like just as SFF fans.
I applaud them for trying.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's true.
And maybe in the future they'll
Golf claps
release.
for trying.
Maybe in the future they'll release a 500 watt brick that doesn't scream.
Or like maybe a 400 watt passively cooled one. Just like make it bigger and just like have a lot more metal. So,
Well, with that, I believe we've wrapped up most of the news. And so we shall move on to the main feature, which is actually something we probably should have done a little while ago, but that's okay, we'll do it now. We're only a month and a half later or so.
Whoops.
And that is, in fact, I'm pretty sure you can mostly blame me for this, because I think we had an article going for this and I totally didn't contribute. But I have thoughts. I have thoughts, and I shall enumerate them now. Listeners, this is the small form factor and low volume 2017 predictions. This is where we get to tell you about all the things we think are going to happen, just to ensure that we jinx ourselves into them not actually happening. Pretty straightforward. I believe we've done this last year. Essentially, we're just going to go around and we're going to talk about what we're looking forward to this year, but also more importantly, what we think is going to happen this year. This can touch upon pretty much any product, brand, industry, really, so long as it's somehow, some way, has something to do with small form factor. Always come up with sort of interesting thoughts and ideas. We always vehemently disagree, but it's always a lot of fun. So, James, let's start with you, since you're alphabetically the first J in order.
Well, I predict in 2017 that somebody will release a short GTX 1080.
Ooh.
No way. I mean, it wouldn't be like Zotac, right? They don't even have like a short.
No, actually, it's not that weird that Zotac did it, because
They're really into this small form
Zotac
factor.
was the first one to like really do an enthusiast mini ITX motherboard. I think, what was that for? I think it was 1156 or maybe 775.
I think it was
I think it
56.
Yeah.
I think it was 1156, and so
It
like
was 55 chips here or something.
yeah, so it by today's standards it's not really all that great, but like at the time ITX was just like, oh man, like maybe like newer builders don't remember this, but like before the modern era of high-end mini ITX boards, it was really slim pickings.
It was all VIA embedded boards or...
Yeah, it was either embedded boards or mini ITX was treated as like your ultra budget boards,
yeah.
And they were just like low-end junk. So yeah, I'm not too surprised Zotac did it, but anyway, as far as predictions, mainly it's just like, I guess hope that Ryzen's good, hope that Vega's good, hope that Intel feels threatened by it and like starts competing but doesn't crush AMD. So yeah, that'll be a lot to look forward to there. I guess power efficiency, because that's the one thing like with the 460, 70, 480 is that they're cool cards. Like price performance is good, but performance per watt just isn't quite up there with NVIDIA. So for a lot of like power constrained and thermal constrained builds, it's just like it makes it difficult to justify the AMD lineup currently, because like if you just like, especially like the DC units, you have pretty serious like wattage limits on those things. So like a lot of times you just can't really fit in your power budget like a 480, which is unfortunate because the price is just really good for the 480s and stuff. So it's a shame that they're not more popular for some of these really small builds, just because of the power constraints. So, oh, and then yeah, one of my, I really think 2017 will be the year of the indie case. I think I've mentioned this a few times, I think, but I think it's gonna happen because it's just, I think we've kind of reached a tipping point where there's a lot of indie cases in development, and like I think the broader SFF community has kind of accepted it and embraced it, as people have just realized that like just the big case manufacturers will just never be able to address all the little different niche designs that people want, because there just isn't enough demand to justify some of these really small layouts people are experimenting with. And then I'm hoping we'll see more innovation in power supplies. I don't know if we'll quite see it this year. There's some really interesting stuff going on with like Fin6 and their technology that will hopefully dramatically reduce the size of the AC/DC side of the equation. So like with their gallium nitride conversion stuff. So, and then also just like Flex ATX, there's rumors that, because like there's the 500 watt platinum rated FSP that I've talked about, and there's rumors that I believe FSP themselves are working on a higher wattage Flex ATX, and then I think possibly Seasonic is working on a 650. So that'd be impressive. So, because like I said, like the 500 watt FSP, at idle it's quiet, 100 watts it's quiet, 250, 300 watts, like anywhere close to full load and it's screaming. So maybe like a 650 watt platinum rated, we could bring that kind of idle, like low idle noise levels up to maybe like 150 to 200 watt range. So like if it could do that within kind of that wattage, then that would make a lot of SFF builds using Flex ATX much more viable from a noise perspective, for kind of like mid-range hardware. So hopefully we'll see more of that. Motherboards, I don't know. Like I think motherboards will be like one of the disappointments of 2017. Because it just seems like, I don't know why, all the motherboard manufacturers just seem so hesitant on AM4. They're just not willing to commit to ITX AM4. And then we saw some good stuff at Computex for ITX, not much for micro ATX, and then just tons and tons and tons of RGB to everything ATX motherboards. So that's a trend that I'm not too fond of. So yeah, we'll see on that. I'm hoping I'm proven wrong on the motherboard things, but I'm kind of doubting it.
Well, we shall see soon enough, hopefully. All right, and with that, we have only one thing left. Actually, no, we have several things left. John.
Right. You're fired. My predictions. What did I say?
Take all the time you want.
Oh, I'm planning on it.
All right.
I predict I'll take all the time I want.
No listeners waiting.
Well, the thing is, I wrote all my thoughts down in this article that will never be published, and I kind of
We should pull up that article.
I chucked it in the trash last week.
Oh, you're blaming me for this.
I got sick of waiting. Middle of February, man. My predictions. I'm thinking stuff like kilowatt SFX, and then the ATX community will just go, "Why?" Because they always do, because they never understand us. A mainstream computer case manufacturer will come out with what they call a small factor case. That'll be about 35 litres, and we will ridicule them.
What a prediction.
What else would there be? I predict that AMD will give Intel a little bit of a fright. I don't predict that they will become like market leaders. There will still be the Intel high end that will still beat them, but we'll see what happens. I predict that small form factor network will continue the Monday, Wednesday, Friday publishing schedule. Won't we, guys?
We'll see.
No confirmation on that one. That worries me.
Hey man, I just edit what you write.
And I also predict that we'll all meet each other finally at Computex.
Ooh,
Yes.
I like that prediction a lot. I really like that prediction. Well, let's see. What do I predict here? See, I can't just sit and dilly-dally and wait too long because I already gave John a bunch of shade for doing that, so I have to talk right away, and I'm immediately regretting this dynamic. Okay, all right. I predict that we will see a GTX 1080 Ti, or Ti, as silly people who don't listen to NVIDIA reps call them, during PAX East. Unfortunately, I can't actually go to PAX East even though I live in Boston, but I'll enjoy that from afar. I predict that Ryzen will have at least one surprise with respect to price. That's all I'm going to say. I predict that at least one new enclosure manufacturer will enter the small form factor market. Shut up, Rover. We have people in the chat disagreeing with the fact that the correct pronunciation of the GTX 1080 Ti is the GTX 1080 Ti. All I can say is if you listen
TI.
If you listen to NVIDIA people, by that I mean people who are paid by NVIDIA to talk about NVIDIA, they call it the Ti. So
They're wrong.
It's the Ti.
Obviously.
They're not wrong. It's their name.
Continue.
Anyway, all right. I've clearly opened a massive can of worms here. Moving on. I believe at least one manufacturer of enclosures who's not currently in the small form factor space will enter the market with a new small form factor enclosure, which is to say an enclosure that meaningfully supports enthusiast grade parts while remaining below 20 liters in volume. That one is probably going to be the more dicey of my predictions, but I have a few brands in mind that I think maybe have been thinking about this for a while, maybe interested in sort of expanding the market that they gear to. And then finally, I too predict that we will have a grand old time in Computex. I also predict that it may or may not be the case that in the very, very, very near future, shirts may be a thing, mugs may be a thing, sweatshirts, stickers might be a thing, but that's all I can say. So those are my predictions.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and with that, I believe we only have one more thing. Actually, for real this time, only one more thing. I'm not lying this time. And that is the fortnightly favorite forum thread, which I'm actually going to kick over to... which of you guys would like to take this on?
James.
Jay!
Yeah. John
Winner!
really looked at it.
I haven't really looked at this one. Sorry, guys.
So, yeah, this is the Encase Project Sidearm. So we were double checking earlier, and so the Encase M1 thread on Hardform first started in September of 2012. So it's been almost 4.5 years now. It's crazy how time flies. So I think because the Nasser dabbled with a kind of like a Steam box console style design, but I think he kind of abandoned that project due to heat concerns. So I believe this is very likely to be well. I think they have other stuff they're working on, but as far as we've seen publicly, I think this is the next closest case to actual release, though it's still in early stages of development. But yeah, so it's Project Sidearm. It's a really interesting design. It's definitely a layout that I think will be quite controversial at first glance with people because it's a very unusual layout. So the idea with the case is that it's a slimmer design than the M1, because the M1 is about 160 millimeters wide. This is about 130.
30? Yeah, that sounds
Yeah,
right.
135 millimeters wide. Doesn't seem like a lot, but basically the idea with this is that it's designed to kind of maximize the performance that you can get and still fit into your carry-on luggage. So this is kind of, and I think this. Well, actually, I know what this originally came up with is that Wahaha 360, the other half of the Encase team, he travels quite a bit. So he wanted something that he could that would very specifically fit in his carry-on luggage, and then also had a handle to obviously carry it. So that's really just kind of what this is designed around. So he actually built or designed his own case, which is kind of like it's a layout. The layout he chose was very much like a lot of people are experimenting with, like the Dan Case A4, where it's just got the motherboard and the GPU back to back, which works, but it kind of limits your cooling options for both the CPU and the GPU. So Nasser is a big fan of dust filters, and he's a big proponent of the idea that the thin fans on GPUs are not oriented for static pressure, and so aren't suitable for. You can't really trust them
For
to
intake, yeah.
to be able to pull in air. Not only are they pushing against a dense heatsink array, but they're like, if you make them like pull air through a dense vent panel and then a dust filter on top of that, and like they're thin fans, they just don't have a lot of static pressure and they would just choke. So he's a big fan of dust filters. So like the kind of alternative that he's proposing to kind of address that issue and still keep everything within kind of this 130, 135 millimeter width is so like the motherboard's kind of oriented like it is in the Dan Case. So you're going to be limited to short CPU heat sinks. And then the video card is behind the motherboard. But rather than having the motherboard and the GPU back to back, instead the GPU's fans are actually on the inside. So the video card's kind of like spaced away from the motherboard, and so there's kind of a gap between the GPU's fans and the back of the motherboard. So it's kind of it's a very unusual layout, I guess. I mean, it's like the A4 except you have the GPU flipped around, so the back side's facing out. So it looks very unusual at first glance, and I'm sure he's going to get a lot of flack for it for people who just don't understand like kind of the thought process that went into this layout. But then what that gets you is that there's two 120 millimeter fans on the bottom of the case, so they're kind of pulling air up from the bottom up through the case, kind of. So part of the airflow will go through the CPU heatsink area, and then the other part of it will go like between the motherboard and the GPU, kind of bringing it fresh air. So it's an interesting idea. And then like I think one of the other interesting things that this allows is that you could have a windowed panel. Because that's one thing on the M1 is I see people ask all the time about, can you put a window on the MCase M1, which people have done it, but it really doesn't work for most like cooling arrangements, because the side vent is a really big part of the intake design for the M1. But so this design, the sidearm, since it's mostly relying on the intake from the bottom fans, then it doesn't rely so much on the side vents. So then that way it could have a window over the motherboard. And so you can more easily and more practically do a nice looking water cooled build that the window would show off, and then so there would be actually like the bottom is like a removable panel, and so like the stock one would just have room for the fan intake, but then you could get like a taller bottom section that would be bigger to fit a radiator. So then you could fit a dual 120 millimeter radiator and then the fans on it, and still have enough clearance for like the intake so the fans aren't just choking against the bottom surface. So it's an interesting design. I'd be curious on how it works in practice once they get a prototype. Initially, it was supposed to use Flex ATX to kind of leave room for like either 3.5-inch drives if you're just air cooling, or like a reservoir and pump combo. But then I kind of reported on my experience with the Flex ATX, and I think he's reconsidered towards making it a little bit bigger for SFX because, yeah, I mean, the problem is if you do like a water cooled system, like a loop with like, I don't know, say like, even if it's like not a really crazy system, like if it's not the X99 ITX board, if it's like a 7700K and then I don't know, like a GTX 1080, you're still talking like 350 watt at load, and then if you overclock it, you could start talking 450, and then that 500 watt Flex ATX, now you're talking 13,000 RPM. So
No, thank you.
yeah, exactly. So
It's also a wind turbine. No.
yeah, so the original proposed layout with Flex ATX looks really interesting, and it's really cool that there's space for dual 3.5-inch drives in this case. But I mean, Flex ATX has a lot of potential, but it's just not quite there yet. So yeah, with SFX, the size difference, I mean, yeah, with SFX it's a little bit bigger, so it's going to be something close to 12 liter for the air cooled version, and like I think a little over 13 for the water cooled version in volume. So like on that spec alone, it doesn't sound very impressive compared to the M1, considering in some ways you're more limited in hardware like CPU cooling, though you can actually fit bigger video cards than the M1. But then again, like theoretically, the M1, if mini DTX ever became a thing, you could theoretically do like Sly or Crossfire in it. So, but I don't know. It's an interesting design. It's just I'm really excited that it looks like they're serious about coming out with another one. Because the M1, it's still a great case, surprisingly. Like there really isn't anything truly competitive to it in that size and form factor. But I mean, it's been out for a while, so it's always nice to see something new and interesting come out from the NCase team.
Just another cool, interesting project.
Indeed.
I think we all hope goes places, and we're all reasonably confident that it will. And
So
with that,
so far.
yes, yeah, right, they're 1 for 1. And with that, unfortunately, we do have to end this program. We have gone through everything that there is to go through, but I'd like to thank all of our listeners so much for tuning in. I'd like to thank both John, aka Confucius, and James, aka Abophobia, for joining us today. My name is Joshua, also known as Playful Phoenix. Thanks again. We will see you in just a few weeks from now. Thanks.